Welcome to the Python short course. If you're new to Python or programming and you've always wanted to learn the basics of software development skills, then this course was designed for you. Python is an extremely popular programming language, and rightfully so. It's widely adopted among software developers, and it is one of the easiest programming languages to get started with. Becoming proficient in Python can open an array of career opportunities for you in fields such as data science, artificial intelligence, robotics, and even software development. Throughout this course, you will learn the basics of the Python programming language. From variables to operators, conditionals, and loops, we'll cover it all. And we'll do this by adopting a practical approach in each and every lesson. So with that said, grab a cup of coffee, grab a seat, and boot up your machine. And without further ado, let's get started. Hi, and welcome to your very first lesson in the Python short course. Today we'll focus on an introduction to the Python programming language. Now, the goal of this course is to teach you the very basics of the Python programming language with bite-sized lessons and a hands-on approach. If you have zero experience as a programmer or software developer, that is absolutely fine. By the end of this course, you should have the confidence to explore intermediate concepts in Python programming going forward. With that said, let's have a look at the objectives for today's lesson. Now, the objectives for today's lesson is as follows. First, we'll explore the Python programming language in a bit more detail. We'll have a look at what exactly Python is, the use cases of Python, and we'll also explore some of the characteristics of the Python programming language. Next, we'll move on to our practical demonstration where we will actually install Python as well as the IDE, otherwise known as the Integration Development Environment. And finally, we'll move on to creating your very first script. Wonderful. Now let's answer a very obvious question that might come to mind, and that is, what exactly is Python? So Python was first developed by Guido van Rossum, its founder, who has stepped down in 2018, and the software is now maintained by the Python Software Foundation. Python is considered a high-level programming language, which implies that it is a programming language with strong abstraction from the details of a computer. And this brings us to the characteristics of the Python programming language. The first is that Python is extremely human readable. This is one of the characteristics in Python among the development community that is widely praised. Next, Python is also an object-oriented programming language, otherwise known as OOP. It is also a strongly and dynamically typed programming language, which provides you with a lot of flexibility. And lastly, Python is also one of the best data-driven programming languages. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly are some of the applications or use cases of Python? Let's take a look. Python is widely adopted among data scientists, among developers who specialize in robotics, among engineers with a background in Internet of Things or IoT, artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, and it's also frequently used in software development. So why exactly should you even take the time to learn Python in the first place? Well, first of all, as we mentioned before, it is a very easy language to learn, especially for beginners. It is widely adopted among software developers in general, as we just mentioned. It is also the most popular programming language according to the PyPL index. Lastly, it is supported by an array of software stacks. So, regardless of the stack that you are working on, you'll most likely run into the Python programming language at some point. Now, here's an example of a piece of Python code. Take note of the syntax, and you can actually see some of the keywords can be found in the English language as well. For example, we've got the keyword for, in, and print. So what exactly does this piece of code do? Well, in the first line of code, all we've done was we've created a list of cars and we've assigned this to a variable called car list. In our second line of code, we've created a loop where we call every single car in our list, assign that to a variable car, and then we print each instance of the car in our list out to the screen. Now, this is not a live demonstration of code, but we'll get to this point eventually. Wonderful, and this brings us to the practical demonstration of this lesson, where we'll focus on installing the Python programming language as well as our IDE. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, in order to get started with Python, there are a couple of executable files that we'll first have to download. Notice that I am working on a Windows machine. The first installation is going to be the actual Python programming language. To find this, you can simply just run a search in Google on Python. Generally speaking, it's the first result that you're looking for under www.python.org. So once you've been greeted with this interface, you can go ahead and browse through the material and the documentation if you'd like, or you can head straight over to the Downloads tab over here. And once you've clicked on this, you'll be presented with all the downloadable versions over here. Again, take the time to work through the documentation if you'd like to take that approach. So I'm going to click on the Download Python tab or button over here, and this is going to download Python for me. In your case, if you are working on a Linux machine or a Mac OS machine, feel free to go ahead and opt for the one that's compatible for your operating system. The next piece of software we want to download is the PyCharm Community Edition. This is quite important because there are two versions of PyCharm. The first is the Professional Edition, which does require a paid license, whereas the Community Edition, on the other hand, is free. So let's maybe just open up this in a new tab. And this is what the home page looks like for PyCharm. Now, as of this recording, if you click on the Downloads tab over here, this is going to download the Professional Edition, and that's not what we want. We want to work with the Community Edition. So I'm going to head back over to my browser, and I'm going to look for the one that says Other Versions over here. So I'll click on this link, and this is going to redirect me to this URL at the top over here. And once again, you want to select the Community Edition. Note that you can select the OS, which is compatible for the version of Python that you are going to be running. In my case, I'm going to select Windows. Now I'm going to cancel this download because I already have the Python programming language and PyCharm downloaded in a separate folder. So I'm going to skip straight to that step, and these are the two files that you would want to download. I'll click on the Python instance, the actual language, and I'll simply go ahead and add the Python exe to my path variable. I'll simply go ahead and click on install now, and this should be fairly quick depending on the machine that you are working with. Now, once the setup was successful, you'll be greeted with a success message. I'll go ahead and close down this window. Next, I'm going to install PyCharm. So I'll double click on this, and I'll simply say run. And much like with the Python programming language, I'm going to have to select a couple of options. I'll go ahead and click next. I'll select the default location, and I'll tick all of these boxes over here. That is the PyCharm Community Edition. I'll also add the open folder as projects, and then I'll create associations of the software with .py formatted files. And then lastly, I'll add the path variable once again. I'll click next, install, and there we go. Now, after a successful install, you might be prompted to reboot your machine. In my case, I'll do this at a later stage. So I'll select the second option. I want to manually reboot later. I'll simply click on finish, and that's it. That's all that's actually required to install our PyCharm as well as the Python programming language. So with all of this out of the way, let's hop into the PyCharm interface and create our very first script. Now, to get started with my very first script, I'm simply going to locate PyCharm. And if I click on my start menu under recently added, I should see the installation over here. If you don't find the installation over here, you can simply just start to type in PyCharm. And with the first result, I'll click PyCharm Community Edition. I'll select this, and this should open up the user interface for PyCharm. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and set up a new project. So I'll select new project, and you want to make sure that your base interpreter points to wherever it is that you decided to install the Python programming language. Remember, this was the first piece of software that we added, and make sure that you are pointing to the executable file. Now, I'm going to set up a new project structure over here, and I'll scroll down to my D drive, and I have this folder called Introduction to Python. I'll simply select lesson 1, which is a folder I created. And if you don't see this folder under your tree structure, you can actually go ahead and create this by simply clicking on the new directory. I'll say lesson 1. I'll click OK, and I'll make sure that I'm pointing to this folder for my project. I'll then click OK, and I'll say create. And this is going to create a brand new project environment from scratch. So give it a bit of time to load. And there we go. We now have a new default project that was created by PyCharm. I'll go ahead and get rid of this notification, and I'll untick the circle over here. So if I run the script by clicking on the play button at the top over here, this is going to generate an output of hi PyCharm. Now, we don't have to go into the details of what's happening over here, but essentially we've created a function that does something specific, like the output message of hi PyCharm, and that's all we need to know. At some point, we will get into functions. This is what is known as the main script, the entry point of our application. And you can actually see in our environment at the top of here, this is the script that we are running. So if I remove this, and if I wanted to create my very own script, I could easily do that by simply deleting all of the text we have over here. And I'm going to start from scratch with a very simple and the legendary hello world. Now, if you do come from a programming background, this is something you've probably done 1,000 times. So I'll simply say print, which is a built-in function in Python, and I'm going to print the words hello world. So look at what happens when I run this script again. If I click on the play button over here, I now have a new message at the bottom that says hello world. And that's it. That is how easy it is to write your very first script in Python. Now, you might be wondering, do I have to go through all of this setup? Do I have to install all of the software? Is it really necessary? Well, not always. If you really want a Python environment on your local machine, I do suggest installing the software as we've done throughout this tutorial thus far. However, there is an easy way to play around in a sandbox environment where you don't have to install the software. And this is particularly useful in the event that you find that the software is just not installing on your system. So to achieve this, we can use a cloud piece of software to run all the Python scripts. And again, for the most part of this course, the cloud or sandbox environment should be just fine, except for when we start working with Python modules. Now, let me go ahead and show you exactly how to access the sandbox or the cloud environment so that you don't have to use all the software that we've installed in this tutorial so far. Now, if you'd really like to make use of the online IDE, you can simply run a search in Google with the keywords online Python IDE. You'll notice that there are a bunch of examples that you can use. In my case, I'm going to select the one by programmers.com. So I'll simply click on the second option over here. And the really cool thing about this piece of software, apart from the annoying advertising, which you can pretty much ignore for the most part, is the fact that everything is handled on the cloud. Even the base interpreter is located on the cloud. So I'm going to delete all the text over here. And if you want to skip the entire installation process that we've gone through previously, then you could simply just access this piece of software. And I'm going to run that exact script that we had, the hello world script, and take a look at what happens. So this is my script. This is my main Py document. And if I click run over here, this is where I'll see my output, which is the equivalent of what we've done with the local software. The only difference is that with the local software, you can create your own environment using local files so that you can create modules and call those modules. But again, that's not going to be a big or massive focus of this course. Keep in mind that the focus of this course is simply just to introduce you to the basics of Python. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson. For this lesson, we've gone through the basics of Python, we've explored the applications and use cases, the characteristics of Python, and we've also learned how to install our very own environment as well as how to work on a cloud environment. And then finally, we developed our very first Python script. In our next lesson, we are going to dive right into working with Python variables, and variables are a very important aspect of any programming language. So for all of that and more, I'll see you in the next lesson. Cheers.